Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Cup, brought to you by Cup of Hemlock Theatre. I am the marketing manager and also host of this panel this week, Mackenzie. And today we're going to be talking about the 2014 production of Antony and Cleopatra, directed by Mr. Gary Griffin. And this was done at the Tom Patterson Theatre. So the old Tom Patterson that is now being replaced with the new Tom Patterson. But we are there tonight, and we'll be talking all about this kind of romance history play, Shakespeare's. So why don't I introduce the rest of our lovely panel tonight. First off, we have our General Assistant of Cup of Hemlock, Ms. Jillian Robinson. Hello, Jill.
Hello, Mac. How goes it?
Very good, very good. What is your ensemble tonight, and what is in your cup?
Right. So, my shirt isn't really on par, I guess, but I have a little a rose above my heart. So maybe that's to condone the love portion of the love story that we're going to be chatting about tonight.
Sure.
And then I just have little tiny gold shields to commemorate the golden accents that are present in our production tonight too. Yes. And for my cup, I am drinking a Caesar tonight.
Oh, well done.
Yeah, so bottoms up. And then I also have some water as the night goes on as well. So
beautiful, beautiful. Next up, we have friend of the company and man who just appeared in our polished reading of Ghosts by Hannah Gibson. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Alex Osborne. Hello, Alex.
Hey. Just like the sound test. I'm good. How are you today?
Very, very good. We're so happy to have you here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself since you're our newest member of the panel?
Well, okay. I'm a former York University graduate, former long-form improv conservatory graduate at the Second City. Did the same training with Will for about a year, and currently I'm getting my MFA at the University of Essex / East 15 Acting School over in the UK.
Good. Yeah, that's exciting. The home of the Bard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's yeah, been to the Globe. It's nice.
Yes. What did you see at the Globe when you were there?
We saw A Midsummer Night's Dream. And
classic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Truthfully, I was disappointed, but
anyways. Okay. We'll leave the Globe review for another time.
Yeah.
But wonderful. And what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking some nice crisp H2O.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And my outfit is it's laundry day tomorrow, so this is the best I can do.
Love it.
It kind of reminds me of almost like the undergarment of the togas that the Romans wear. So there you go. I see where you're going with that, Alex.
Sure.
Perfect. And we're so happy to welcome back after her wonderful appearance on our Hamlet panel. Now she's back for her second of 3 appearances. Please welcome back Tanisha Cunningham. Hello, Tanisha.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Hello.
For back.
Yes, we're so excited to have you back.
I'm so glad to be back. And this was a great production to watch. So I'm excited to be here to talk about it.
Yes, quite a revolutionary Stratford production. The first time at the festival where a woman of color played Cleopatra.
Yeah. So it was very
exciting.
That is,
yes, that was quite a momentous moment. Okay, so what is your ensemble and what is in your cup tonight, Tanisha?
So I forgot I had this dress in the closet and it's like black, but it has gold accents. So I was like, perfect, especially with the neckline. Very cool. I threw on my gold bangles.
Yes.
And like, I'm always wearing my gold ring. And then my cup, this is another cup in my bear mug collection. And I am drinking coffee yet again.
Love it. Love it. Coffee makes the world go round.
It also makes me go round.
Perfect. And last but certainly not least, we have our artistic director of Cup of Hemlock, the man behind the legend and the myth himself, Mr. William Bartley, the director of our polished reading of Ghosts. Will, how are you tonight?
Doing good, but I'm afraid I might not be able to live up to that introduction, Mac. That was a lot.
What's in your cup tonight, Will?
My cup, I am drinking from a groomsman Starbucks cup that I got for being part of our general manager's wedding, actually.
Very good.
And then in the cup is an iced coffee with some, what's the word I'm looking for? Not sugar water. I'm a bartender. I should know the
syrup.
syrup.
Syrup, there it is.
Yeah, here we go. And then also there's a little bit of rum in here, so it's got some bittersweet flavors, just like the play had some bittersweet notes.
Love that.
Well done, well done. And is your ensemble also kind of going for that toga look like Alex?
Well, no, actually, I decided to wear a black shirt because, like the shroud of death that hangs over this entire play, knowing the history of it all. But in truth, it's certainly not because we have no AC at our new place in Kingston and we have a heat warning going on, and this is the lightest shirt I own. That's definitely not the reason.
Wonderful, wonderful. And tonight I am drinking from my silver tankard once again, and I am drinking a raspberry Crystal Light, keeping on theme with the reds of Rome. So I got my red shirt, my red bow tie, and I don't know if I've ever showed anybody this, but when we record, I turn my phone off, and to keep time, so I'm not looking up at my clock during the recording. I have on my desk my Shakespeare pocket watch. So he just sits on my desk and hangs out, and yeah, so he's been here all the episodes, just kind of watching over us. So there we go. All right, so why don't we dive into this play, as it were? We're going to start off with our traditional question, which was, which character was best performed? And Alex, as our newest member, why don't you start that off tonight?
Oh, okay, no pressure. All right. Well, which character was best performed?
Mm-hmm.
I personally felt that, what's the actress's name? Yanna's performance of Cleopatra.
Yanna McIntosh?
Yeah, thank you. Yanna McIntosh.
Well,
She was by far my favorite actress and really stood head over shoulders everybody else in that play.
Yes, Yanna is fantastic. She's been with the festival a number of times. She was also the first female of color to play Lady M opposite Colm Feore. She was the evil stepmother in Cymbeline, and she also played Queen Elizabeth, I believe, in a production. I forget which play it was in, but yeah, she's been all over the festival. She's an absolutely outstanding actress. I think she played Titania in Midsummer.
Lady Macbeth.
Yes. Yeah, she was Lady M. So yeah, Yanna is absolutely outstanding. She's always a treat whenever you get her on stage. I was very excited just to watch her performance again for this particular play, for sure. But yes, excellent choice with Yanna. Perfect. Tanisha, what about you? Who is your shout out of the night?
That is exactly who I was gonna say too. It was so phenomenal watching her. But I also have like a shout out.
Okay.
I loved Tom McCamus, or
yes,
Enobarbus.
Yes.
I thought anytime he was on stage and was speaking, I knew exactly what he was saying. It was so clear. It was it was just so captivating. So I need to shout him out. But Yanna was like my top pick.
Yes.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that happen with Tom, in many of the performances that we've watched.
He always just jumps right in there with one of those great supporting roles that just knows exactly what to say. I mean, we saw that really well illustrated with Coriolanus.
I think what Tom really does well is he tends to break up a lot of those traditional rhythms that we hear when Shakespeare's orated and brings it into a little bit more of a modern rhythm that we might speak to each other in. It makes the text feel more contemporary and like makes it so much more understandable. Because there's nothing worse for me when I listen to an actor just doing ba-dum, 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 ba-dum through the entire play. It's like you start to lose track of whatever's happening on the stage.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Absolutely.
Great.
Tom has a great mastery of the Shakespearean text, for sure. And we just saw him as King John, I think 2 episodes ago now. So yeah, he's been all over this film series. So he is absolutely wonderful. Jill, who is your shout out of the night?
Yeah, so good piggyback off of Will's comment there, because I feel like Yanna was my choice as well as everyone else, and I feel like she does the same thing too, where she had wonderful swing of playing into the classical poetic nature of this piece. And in her pre-chat with Lois was saying how this is some of the most poetic work that Shakespeare has put on the stage. And so I think she did a really good job of playing into that, but then also having that same kind of nature that Tom has, where it kind of grounds it in a bit more of like a vocabulary of modern humanity, which really rings forth. And so I think with that too, her ferocity and her playfulness, sometimes at the same time, but sometimes separate, like that swing that she had was so enriching to watch. And so, yeah, 100%, she took the crown for me. But I do have really tiny shout outs or moments, some characters. So I talk about this sometimes when we see actors, even supporting actors that we've seen in other shows of this series so far. So Andrew Robinson stood out for me in his tiny moment of rage as, I believe I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Ventidius. Again, it was a very small moment where they stabbed the messenger in the back, and he had a couple lines, fierce lines, and it was just contrasting that to his role in Love's Labour's Lost. It was just so lovely seeing the lover boy was gone, and this was just like this evil soldier. So that was really neat. And then I love Sophia Walker, our Charminian, or sorry,
Charmin.
Yeah. She just has so much color to her facial expressions, and I really we got to see a lot of that too, her being kind of like the gesture to Cleopatra a lot of the times, because she's kind of her like lady in waiting. Yeah, I'm excited to see her in Merry Wives, because I love watching her facial acting amongst everything else she does. And Ben Carlson and Geraint Wyn Davies, again, they really held it down for me as well. Really solid arcs for both of them, and we've seen them in other productions we've reviewed on this series as well. So shout out to them.
Very good. Well, I'm going to piggyback off you, because Sophia Walker was part of my two-prong shout out, because I have to agree, like, as this lady in waiting, she kind of just always stole the show every time she was on. Like that final scene when Cleopatra commits suicide via the asp, and then it's all those moments afterwards where Sophia Walker has to put Cleopatra to rest, and you could really feel that connection these two people had, and you saw it throughout the entire show. Where you're right, Jill, where like Cleopatra was the voice, but Charmin was her arm and kind of moved things around the board for her. And it was wonderful watching these two fantastic actresses kind of interact with each other. And then also special shout out to the actress who played Iris, Jennifer Mogbach, because because funny enough, that was the role that Yanna McIntosh played the last time she did this play years ago. So once again, just watching these three lovely ladies work together on stage was wonderful. But I have somebody to shout out who's similar to a David Collins of this series, and that is Randy Hodgson. And he played, in this production, he played Lepidus, and he shows up in all these parts throughout the series and throughout the festival, where every time he's on, he's wonderful, because he just, once again, he brings so much life to these smaller characters. Like last week at Pericles, he was Bolt, and he played opposite Bridget's Bod, and he does all these kind of, when I saw him in The Winter's Tale years ago, he played Time, and they had him on this great crane that actually turned him around in a circle. And he was also Sinex, and a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum. He's going to be in Merry Wives. He's a wonderful character actor. He just kind of morphs his way through all these different plays, and you can always I also love him just for his voice. He has a very distinct voice when you hear him talk, and it's something that, like, the minute you hear him go, oh good, you're here too. And he just shows up, and he has this wonderful presence on stage. And in this particular production, he was this wonderful calming presence between Ben Carlson and Geraint Wyn Davies, like when the three of them are sitting in that triangle on the platform, kind of going at it with each other, and he's just kind of there finding that humor. Him and Tom McManus were kind of doing the dual part of that calming feature on stage. And so between him and Tom, they had this great presence together.
They anchored a lot of the political discussion, I think, in my opinion, which was lovely.
They do, and he's just shown up in all these plays, and he always has these great supporting roles. And I just felt, you know what, he deserves a shout out for all these great little small parts he does to make the show a better whole. So yeah, Will, who is on your list?
Okay, yeah. I mean, not to add to the combo that everybody else is going with, but Yanna kind of stole the show for me. Like every single scene that she was in, she absolutely commanded the stage. And literally, there are some scenes where every other actor and character on the stage is revolving around her. She's the center of the universe, and she carries it so well. Like you don't even question it, because her energy and the confidence she brings into that role is completely fitting for that type of blocking. And she just kind of blew me away between like the moments of playing with people, like especially playing with the men and playing mind games with them, to the more ground and sweet moments that she had with Mark Antony, like right up into the end, like the resolve that she commits herself to. Like, my God, I hope to see her in more roles, but Cleopatra was such an amazing role for her, because Cleopatra is one of Shakespeare's few female characters that gets to just let like loose and really just own their personality. And when we talk about other roles that some of these female actresses have played through Shakespeare or through Stratford's work, you know, I think they end up in a lot more of these reserved, conservative female roles, and it's so nice to see one that is just much more aggressive and forward. So yeah, Yanna stole the show for me, like from start to end. She was the only person I could really watch.
It's hard not to. She is so charismatic in her performances, and you just can't help but watch her go. I remember watching her as Lady M, and that in the out damn spot moment was so heartbreaking, because she brought so much heart to this character who oftentimes could just be a villain, and she brought such a humanity to this woman struggling with power, and it was wonderful.
She definitely puts the infinite variety not only in Cleopatra, but in all the works that she's done.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, why don't we kick off into our next section, which was, what was our favorite production design or favorite production element of this particular show? Will, you went last time, so why don't you kick us off this time?
Sure. I mean, I feel like this is mentioned almost every single week on all of these productions, but the costumes once more kind of stole the show for me. Like between the like almost ill-fitting rigid armors of the Romans in contrast to the free flowing silky robes of like the Egyptian peoples, like it was just such a beautiful contrast and representative of like the conflict between the two nations as well that was taking place and growing throughout the piece. So yeah, I mean, for me, I don't think the costumes get much better than as they were in this show, in my opinion. So that's where I'm going to stand. I don't think there's much more that needs to be said about it. The costume designer for Stratford does such an excellent job, like on all their shows. But this one in particular, I really just like specifically with the, like I talked about, like just the rigid structure and design of the armor for the Romans. Like it really showed, and like those the textual moments where they talk about like the almost stoic and stalwart personality that a Roman should have, like a good Roman should be committed to these more conservative ideals. And like watching Mark Antony like strip away his armor so much through the piece is like, for me, like, is there a better representation of that change that Mark Antony goes through throughout the piece? Like, I don't think so, and I think the costumes deserve so much credit for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jill, I saw you nodding away the minute Will said costumes. So why don't you jump in on that one?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I kind of took a different approach to this question this week. I think I did it with Macker's episode, but mine is kind of more like certain favorite moments that I clocked in the show as opposed to an element. But I will back up Will in saying that yes, like the costumes to me really stood out amongst all the other production elements. Just the fine tuning of everyone's costume being so different and so personalized to that person, I think was astonishing too. Like even every one of Cleopatra's outfits had a purpose and was the weaving work and the color patterns, like there was, it was just a spectacle in itself, which I really admired. But yeah, so I kind of focused on little chunks that stood out for me. So anything to do in the Egyptian court, the playfulness and the freedom. Actually, Yanna was mentioning in the pre-show chat with Lois how that there's a whole, like there's a fluidity that's present in the Egyptian court, and it kind of has those people be seen as ahead of their time, and that's such a stark, wonderful contrast to the order and pomp and circumstance of Rome. And I think they even just took that a step forward by having many different levels of the staging of those scenes, and the playing and toying around with the shisha, like that added such a fun element too. And there really was that freedom of physicality, which instilled in the freedom of text that was present in those scenes. So I favored the Egyptian scenes more than the Roman ones for sure. But one scene also that was just really fun was the drunk scene between all the Roman men when they've kind of come to a conclusion of no fighting, and just again the three I guess Geraint, Davies, and Lepidus, their whole playing of the text in that moment too was really funny. And I love when you see at somewhere like Stratford where there's that unfortunate stereotype of, like Will was saying earlier, like you take the text and it's so traditional to the sense and kind of in a container. And when there's these little explosive scenes like this, I think it's just so encouraging as performers and viewers to be like, no, like the text sounds heavy and weighted, but the portrayal of it shouldn't be or doesn't have to be. So those were the moments that really stuck out to me. And I think it played into the fact that, yes, this piece kind of revolves around politics and stuff, but it really is rooted in personal relationships and human interaction. And so those scenes really stood out as anchors for me.
Wonderful. Alex, how about you? What stood out to you?
I quite enjoyed the sets personally, because there was just enough information on stage with whatever set pieces they have and props for you to fill in the space. Like I think it was one of the designers talking about, what if we built that boat that Barbarous is describing? But it's just like, not just the language, but just even having set in its simplest form is so much more powerful for the imagination, and it's just that more engaging for an audience member.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I loved in the close-ups where you could see on the columns all those hieroglyphs that were etched into them. Same thing with the tablet on the center stage. Like, oh yeah, all that little detail. Once again, Stratford does a great job with their sets of adding in all these great little bits of detail that you wouldn't particularly notice unless you get these great close-ups on stage in the film. That really kind of allows for that notice to happen. So yes, absolutely, the set for sure is a wonderful bit for this show. Considering, once again, as we talk about the Tom Patterson, it's such a long thrust that you can't really do too much with set. Gary Griffin talked about how when they first were doing runs, they had a lot more furniture, and as they went along, they just pared it back and back and back, just realizing that they didn't need as much because with what you have, it's very little. As long as you got some throw pillows, some blankets, like 3 chairs, you're good. The costumes do the rest of the work for you. That kind of takes the heavy lifting off the set that sometimes we see on the festival stage, where the set becomes a much bigger proponent of the show, for sure. But yeah, Tanisha, what do you think? What was your standout of the night?
My standout was from the whole production was like, it's a tie-in like of the costumes, hair, and makeup. Like as a woman of color, I was looking at Cleopatra's hair the whole time. So I'm like, there's gonna be wig changes. Like there has to be wig changes. And I was delighted to see like 3 wig changes, and they were stunning. And her dress changes were stunning as well. And like in the pre-show chat, the chat with like the designers, they were saying how like they went with like, it was sort of like rooted in academic stuff, but it was also like with feeling. So they're like, okay, she's more upset, so we're gonna have like the burgundies and the velvets like in this in these scenes. And I loved that because it was so fitting, and I didn't really notice, like when I was watching, I was just like, this is so incredible. And then taking a minute afterwards, when I heard them say that, to like piece it together, I was like, that makes so much sense. And it was interesting too, because she was saying, like, Yanna was saying, oh, I didn't really understand that, like, she's like the sensuality, because somebody asked her a question. She's like, really?
Yes.
Sensuality? But then she's like, oh, well, I guess because the fluidity and like the costume she mentioned earlier, like I'm not in like this big corseted bridal like layers of fabric. She's a queen who's like essentially in very like sexy attire, like the chains, the peekaboo like from her side all the way down. It was so gorgeous, but so fitting at the same time. Because she, like everyone has been saying, like commanded the stage, and it was just incredible to see like the detail and everything. So that was my standout for sure.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off you because the costumes were my standard of the night as well. Like I have my first note here. Like, did they just pluck these costumes out of like old Hollywood? Because like this feels like one of those great old sword and sandal epic film costumes where you have these gorgeous gowns that Cleopatra gets to wear and these wonderful togas. And there was so much detail that was put into all these costumes. Like Tanisha said, the fact they reflected Cleopatra's mood in her outfits, but then also with like the Roman togas, the fact that they were kind of faded and looking older, it kind of shows the fact that like we're at the end of the Roman Republic, which is like, and then we're about to see the rise of the Roman Empire. So it's that thing of like the old kind of garb is kind of faded and it's showing there. Same thing with Wilson with the way the armor kind of wasn't fitting right anymore. Like there was a bit of that restriction, but then also like in the fact that Mark Antony's toga had these bits of embroidery that almost looked a bit Egyptian with the way they kind of looked, in the way the fabric they chose for him, that kind of white toga look. It had a bit of that kind of Cleopatra Egyptian kind of cotton kind of quality to it too. So it was a great kind of showing him still being connected to Egypt, even though he's sitting in Rome in a political meeting. And I think the close-ups just really helped, especially with like all the detail that went into Cleopatra's jewelry and collars and all that intrinsic kind of beading they did for her outfits and her crowns and things like that. It was just wonderful. Like the costumes were really just yes, the smoky eye.
So gorgeous.
Yes. And the last thing I'll say about the costumes, especially with Cleopatra and the other, I mean, some of the other Egyptians maybe not so much, but for Cleopatra at least, they didn't try to like certainly for eroticize her. Like they didn't try and make her look like Princess Leia in the Mesopotamia.
Jedi.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
That look. I they didn't try and sex Cleopatra up to the point where it's like this just feels uncomfortable and weird. She still had this regal quality about her, but her gowns felt like she's in a hot pyramid in Egypt. She's not going to be in a corset. She's going to be in these long, flowy, beautiful robes. But it wasn't, and even like the way they did, as you said, the peekaboo, whatever that thing they do on the side of the gowns, where like it wasn't meant to be erotic. It was more just meant as a things got to breathe. So the way they built the gowns was very economically as well. So I really appreciated the fact that the designer's name, her name is Charlotte Dean, and she did a fantastic job on set and costume for this.
And I feel like
show.
she owned her sensuality. So it wasn't like they tried to eroticize her. She any sensuality she had, she brought it to it was part of her personality. Allowed to do that.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, to Tanisha's point earlier, like there's nothing better like being a female, watching a female like have so much agency and power. And also seductive qualities, but it's not placed upon her, like it's already in her, right? And yeah, the costumes were just sort of like accessories to the work that Cleopatra is. So yeah, that was really refreshing to watch.
Definitely gonna get back to it later, but just the fact that Cleopatra and Yanna playing Cleopatra like just had so much autonomy throughout the entire performance. Like the moment she decided to shift into being like the ruler of the country, as opposed to like a lover, as opposed to a friend, like the shifts in terms of the emotional scope and the psychology of the character were so prominent. Like that's really what drew me into the whole performance, is like really from one moment to the next, it was difficult to know exactly how Cleopatra was going to react in certain situations. And like that power and that authority she drew into those moments was just incredible to watch.
She talked about that in the pre-show too. Sorry, Mac, I know we're kind of veering away from schedule here, but just to touch on that, because it is very much on par. In the pre-show, she was saying how as much as this character has so much power, there's a lot of stuff that is said about her and not through her. And there's a lot of moments where she has to be reactive, but that reaction has to be almost more powerful than the action happening. So she said just like as a performer and a female, there was a lot more character work alongside historical backing for this character too. But I thought that was really something good to highlight too, is that the fact that reaction and a lot of things are said of her but not through her, but yet she still owned the space.
Yes. And I'm putting a pin in Cleopatra for now because we do have a question all about her
True.
in a moment. But in the meantime, Jill, why don't you kick us off on the next question, which is, what was the weakest part of the production?
Yeah, so I kind of am playing devil's advocate to Alex, so I wasn't as fond of the set. It wasn't that I completely disliked it, and I knew it was on Tom Patterson, and I knew this is a space where minimalist setting works, and it's basically required for a lot of pieces that happen here. But I just thought there could have been more done, but more not in necessarily adding more furniture pieces per se, but just the same intricacies that were done to the costumes, maybe placed upon the set a bit more too. Like I did notice the columns, and I did notice the transformation of the red shrouds kind of going over those columns when we switched settings and such. But a lot of the times, I felt when it was like Egypt, we had the couch and pillows, and Rome, we had the 3 chairs. I just kind of wanted some variation within those prominent settings. Not quite sure how that would have been done, but I think a lot of it too is that this text, as I said before, it's very rich in this piece, and there's a lot of like political storytelling, and I don't think it's vindictive enough to like always allow actors to just stand and have that flavorful moment of speech and not really needing a setting. I think it would have benefited from a little bit more. Will's smiling, so I feel like he disagrees. A little bit more of a setting backing. One thing I really did enjoy, and I don't think we've had this in the space yet. We might have had actors go up into the audience, but the scaffolding level that was apparent.
We had it with King John.
It
was in King John as well.
Okay, great. So with that, I liked that level switch, and I liked that when the men needed to have power, they almost had to place themselves on that pedestal, but the women, like Cleopatra, kind of didn't. In a way, I don't know, there was just that kind of came out to me. There was also like an echoing quality that occurred in the scaffolding scenes too, that added another fun sound element. So that would probably be my weakest. Again, it worked, like it wasn't distracting, but I just kind of wanted a little bit more intricacy like the costumes had.
Fair enough. Will, what were you smiling about? What did get you going on?
You know, it's a rare thing for me to say this. For those that know me, they know that Aristotle's Poetics is something that I reference a lot in terms of like structuring of a show. This is one of the first productions I've seen from Stratford that they could have allowed for a little bit more spectaclism, which is, in Aristotle's opinion, like the final priority of a piece, because everything else was pretty tight. Like I enjoyed the acting, the production elements were pretty solid as well. So I wish they went not a huge amount more, but we are visiting 2 of the most decadent places in both Egypt and in Rome.
Yeah.
I do wish that there was a little bit more representation of that decadence as well.
Yeah.
Maybe the disparity between the 2 decadences, although both might be living wealthy lives based on their nations, what are the differences between those 2 levels of wealth, right? So, I mean, more than anything, I wish that I just saw a little bit more playfulness between the designs of the like of all the production elements. But the area that I felt suffered most wasn't the set. The area I felt suffered the most, again, and I hate this because I feel like I say it every time, and especially just coming off of Pericles, that had such incredible lighting. Now this piece, which felt so static and dull again. Like there were moments of dimmer lighting if they were within like a certain area, right? But like if they were within walls, within a room, like deep within the temple or something like that, like it was darker lighting. But really, is that the extent that we should expect from Stratford? Like kind of bums me out a little bit because like I think back to Pericles, I think back to Hamlet, where the lighting was so dynamic throughout the entire piece and like really gripped you for the entire performance as well. And I just, it kind of fell flat for me here. So I was very disappointed in the lighting. I felt they could have gone much, much further with it. And again, it's mostly a desire for that to happen based on how tight the other elements of this production were, which is like a rare thing for me to say. As you know, I'm a pretty harsh critic. So
yes.
Also, excuse the cloth. It's a very cold cloth, and it's very hot here.
Fair enough. Yeah. Gary Griffin, who this was his first Shakespeare production he was directing at the festival. He had directed Camelot. He had directed West Side Story, and then this was kind of his first foray into Stratford Festival Shakespeare, because he had done it in Chicago. But yeah, both his musical productions were fantastic for just that cohesiveness of all the elements.
And I guess that's what I find a little bit strange too, is like here we have a director coming from a musical background, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm being too harsh on the lighting, because the lighting is one of the first things that I consider when I look at design elements. But like it didn't stand out to me. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. Fair enough. Tanisha, what about you? What's standing out to you?
The lighting was also the weakest part for me as well. I love lighting. Like, it's one of the things that when I took in production, I took like a couple, like 2 years on it, and I like loved it the most. So it's one of the things that I always look for. And yeah, after coming off of like Hamlet, I just know you can do so much more with lighting. Like, I've seen pieces that do some like really dynamic stuff. So there was one point where I like was straining to see Cleopatra's face, and I was like, I don't want to do that. Like there just could have been a little bit, I don't know, more better choices is what I'm thinking. But like it was kind of hard to choose. Like there was a lot. The production was really well done, but if I had to choose something, the thing that just did not hit the mark for me was the lighting.
Fair enough. Alex,
well,
you look like you're ready to jump in here.
Yeah, my heart's racing a bit. I agree with the lighting, but I found the majority of actors were very weak in this show.
I have
to say.
Yep.
I found, especially all the male actors playing the Romans, I felt that their voices were shrill. I felt that they all had the same tone to their voice. They didn't have any variety. There's beautiful language in this piece. Like, I'm going back to Enobarbus. Enobarbus was, no offense, the worst to me. When he's talking about the barge burning, it's just boom, 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 boom. And it's just like, what are you trying to hit me with here? Like, I don't, like, he's not using the beautiful language to, like, paint that image of the boat. And the drunk acting, that, oh my God, that threw me off completely, because like in the background, I got distracted by other actors that were just like kind of just walking on. And it's just like, well, where are you walking to? Like, I know the action's supposed to be here, but I'm more distracted by you because it looks like you don't know what you're doing up there. So like, oh man, it just really infuriated me, because some of them have been there for 11 seasons, 15 seasons, and it's just like, what's special about the performance? I'm sorry.
You know what, Alex? If it doesn't mind a little bit, I gave a pretty unfavorable review of Tom McIntosh's performance in King John as well. So
there we go. Okay,
yeah.
I feel better.
Yeah, and I have to piggyback off Alex on this, because it wasn't until Geraint Wayne Davies pointed it out himself in the cast reunion about how his performance just felt too big for the film. Like it just felt loud and intense the entire time. There was no dips and varieties. I went back and rewatched some of this stuff, and I went, yeah, like I it just felt all very one. No, compared to Yanna McIntosh, who had variety in her performance, Geraint, I felt didn't quite hit this time around. I don't think this was his most standout performance of all that we're going to see him in. And I have to say Ben Carlson too. I felt I was rewatching his character from Timon of Athens. I forget what his name was. The kind of the cynical philosopher character. Yeah. But watching him again, I kind of went, oh, we're just seeing another Timon. But this came before Timon, so maybe he was taking his whatever his name is. Octavius, thank you. Octavius Caesar performance, and just translated that into whatever his character's name is in Timon. But I just didn't feel the love in Ben Carlson's character, and the whole point is that this character is supposed to be a very layered human person who, this is a very human play where there's no, we're definitely going to get into this, but there's no real villain of the story. And so because that, you have to have people playing different roles in almost every time you see them on stage. And I felt a lot of the time that just wasn't the case. It just felt very kind of flatline, one notey for a lot of the performances. And I don't know if that was Gary, Gary the director's direction, or that was just the way the actors were playing it because of the space. Because as we've heard with the Tom Patterson, it's a very interesting space where the actors are so close to the audience, but yet you also can be so far away when you're at the top of the seating in the old Tom Patterson. I don't know if they were trying to play to multiple different angles of this. I don't know. But yeah, for me, the acting of it just wasn't there for me. Alex, go.
It was kind of like, it reminds me of like the Blackfriars Theater, the second theater that Shakespeare worked in, because it's a closer proximity, but you're almost working in that round style as well. And just wanted to think that of like, whether it's, you know, the bigger stage or that stage, there's still that 360 element. And and you have to be spatially aware as a performer on there. And I just didn't think they had any idea where they were half the time as well.
No, it's a funny thing for me too, because like now that we're talking about the Romans performances, I'm looking back and I'm like, right, the Romans were in this play.
Yep.
Because it hits this note for me where like everything from like the Cleopatra Egypt storyline of Antony and Cleopatra was very much like, this is great, I love this, and then every time the Romans came on stage, it was more like, okay. What?
Yeah. You're here too.
And as soon as you mentioned that, Alex, I was like, oh yeah, right.
That were my thoughts exactly. Well, like honestly, I was like, oh yeah, that was like the time that I was like doing other stuff, not doing other stuff, but like I was like that, like when your mind wanders is when you're like, okay. Whenever the Romans were doing things, I had to be like, oh yeah, I'm watching a thing.
Yeah.
When you were an active audience and you become a passive audience.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, so let's head into the final part of our production discussion of this particular play, which is, do we think this production hit the mark and is it worth the watch? Tanisha, why don't you kick us off on this one?
Okay, I'm just gonna go down to where, okay, yes. I said yes, 100%, because for me, just watching that many like people of color on stage is always like so beautiful to watch, and like especially in a Shakespeare play. Like I have never seen that before. Like I don't, yeah. Just being honest, I've never seen that before. I haven't really seen a lot of plays. Like I've seen quite a number, but I'm not like a play buff or anything. But anyways, that was amazing to see. I thought like the language was pretty clear. Like apart from like I guess the boring Romans, like it was overall like a good production to watch, and it was pretty captivating. And I thought like seeing the costumes and stuff like that was just gorgeous. If you're watching this, I thought like if you're somebody who has never read this play, which is me, and watching this, like you can get a great like deal of like, okay, this is what this play is about, and the grandeur of it, or like, you know, even like a high school kid who's like just like trying to like see what this play is about, watching this production would be great. And then for people who like love this play and who are maybe like revisiting it, like I thought they would probably love this production too. So I thought, yeah,
I'm actually going to piggyback off you, Tanisha, because one of my notes is that I think because, well, first of all, the costumes and the sets, great to watch just for that element, but also for Yanna's performance, and then also the fact that this isn't a white lady playing Cleopatra. I'm like right then and there, like that sold me on, yes, we should show this to people. I mean, the fact that Kim Cattrall from Sex and the City has played this role, I think she said 2 or 3 times. And the fact she's done like this role has been played by so many white women, and it's so great to see Yanna getting to kind of take the reins of this. It's like, yes, let's do this. And also, I think it just helps that compared to other Shakespeare plays that are produced, this isn't produced often. So similar to what I said with King John in Timon, where Stratford's kind of cornered the market on the on the Antony and Cleopatra recording, where there's not many to choose from when you're going to have to show people performances, really. So I think overall, I think just for Yanna's performance, I would show it, and then just for the costumes and the set, I think this is worth the showing to people. I mean, if you're wanting a better, more evened out acting performance wise, I think you can find a better BBC 70s 80s version that they probably did. But I think, overall, I just think this performance was really, or this production was really kind of worth the watch for people. And because it's not done, I think it's nice seeing these lesser done plays getting a chance to be recorded, like Timon, like King John, like Antony and Cleopatra, compared to always seeing the recordings of R&J and Macker's Hamlet, King Lear, like these smaller known plays. It's lovely seeing Stratford taking the time to record these parts of the canon as well, in their endeavor to record the entire Shakespeare canon. But yeah, wonderful. Will, you're nodding along. What saith you?
Yeah, I mean, so there's many facets to this answer, because it's a yes and no for me. First of all, the big part of the yes is that this play, more than most of the other ones that we've seen from Stratford, is a little bit more representative of what I hope Stratford aims to do moving forward with the productions in terms of representation. I thought it was just great to see like a well-balanced cast that has diversity on stage, especially coming off of King John, because that was such a huge discussion that we had that week too, where it's just one person of color on stage and the smallest character too. It was like, it felt like a pretty big disservice to who is a very good actress in that play. And so, for the sake of diversity and representation on stage, it was great. The lighting could have been so much better. Even just throwing in a little bit more amber washes across the stage could have made it just so much better. But overall, like, because usually this question, at least from what I remember, this question kind of came about with the addendum of like, would you show this to like kids trying to learn more about Shakespeare? It's like 100%, yes, absolutely. Like the dramatic builds and the tension that took place between like the Egyptian side of the conflict was fantastic. And though the Roman side of things was a little bit bland, like Mark Antony held enough power throughout those parts to carry the piece through. So yeah, but the biggest thing for me, and the thing that I think is often missed when I have seen this play done other times, is the desperation of the two lovers trying to make it work. And this play caught that. And that's the humanity of this piece. And like, if you don't have that, you don't have Antony and Cleopatra. Like, there's reasons that so many stories and books and like incredible plays have been written about this love, right? It exists across so many different cultures in terms of the actual dynamics at play and like what their fates were, both in life and afterlife, as we read in like Dante's Inferno, for instance, right? Is like, if you don't catch the desperation of these two lovers to hang on to each other, you've missed the whole point of this play. It's not the politics is a supporting fuel to the fire. Like, the fire itself is their love. And like, yes, that alone, like when you see Mark Antony and Cleopatra on stage together, represented by these two brilliant actors, like, man, yes, it's worth watching, at least for that. For that.
To slightly touch on that too, Will, just to props to Geraint Davies and Yanna McIntosh's chemistry and their physicality with each other. Like, every time they kissed, there was like years upon years of passion behind that. And even the moment when he's dying in her arms, and those several kisses back to back to back, and like, even you could tell like Yanna was clearly close to Geraint Davies' microphone at one point, because you could hear her panting quite audibly over his speech, but it wasn't distracting at all, because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just adding a whole another level of realness to that moment. So just like the intimacy with them in this piece was very well done, and comfortable and tactful too. And that's, as a modern audience, that intimacy is should be like a huge discussion question for these pieces and for performing these types of pieces. That, fueled with the intelligence of these actors, was spot on.
Wonderful. Alex, final thoughts before we head into more talking about the play?
There's only a couple of reasons I would watch this again. One, the Egypt court. Two, the set and costume designs. Otherwise, I can think of other recordings that are better of Antony and Cleopatra that capture most of the themes of the piece. But I would strongly encourage people to watch McIntosh's version of Cleopatra, because that by far is, and probably will remain for a while, my favorite female lead. So I would only watch it again for her, but Majority of everything else, no.
And just Max, sorry, because I kind of piggybacked off Will, just to add, this can be my section of this question too. I definitely, I wanted there to actually be more BIPOC representation with this piece, to be honest. There was, so a lot of this is through the character, through the actor E.B. White. He actually had the chance to play both Alexis and sorry, I always botch this name, Proculius? The Roman guard that comes in and has that conversation with Cleopatra near the end, which, by the way, I really admired seeing two people of color have that conversation. I think if Proculius, I think I'm saying that right, was white in that moment, it wouldn't have clicked as well as it resonated the way it did. So there was that. There was sort of, he had that duality going on. He kind of got to play players in both realms. Because of that, and because I just think, I mean, yes, I know this production was 2014, but going forward too, I wanted there to be, I loved the amount of BIPOC representation in this, but I just wanted there to be so much more, and especially because there was a lot of bland and flat line moments that I think just overall, with a richer cast, I think it would have had a better go at the text that this piece provides too. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add to this before we moved on.
Fair enough. All right, so now we're gonna segue away from the production, and we're gonna kind of dive a little bit deeper into the actual play itself. So we're gonna kick this off with our first question, which is, why is Cleopatra considered to be one of the great female roles of the Shakespeare canon? Jill, I see you like chomp the bit for this, so why don't you kick us off here?
Tanisha, feel free to jump on board this as well. So first of all, we kind of touched on this already a little bit, but to me, Cleopatra is a female character in the canon that her agency is, she's born with her agency. It's not earned, or it's not placed upon her from a man. I think that speaks so many levels. So not only is she sort of born into a place of politics, like she already is that, and she can kind of continue being that without a man like telling her that she is that. So in a way, this character challenges men arguably more than any other female character will do in the canon, because she rightfully so, like, it has her own identity. And sorry, I have noted section for this because it was really something I wanted to get into. This was in discussion, in the pre-show discussion too, of how Cleopatra is a character you can't put in a box. And Yanna was talking to Lois, the director of education, in the pre-shot, of saying that with a lot of Shakespeare's women, it's challenging to play because they're pretty much a mixed bag. You have a wonderful storyline to play with these women, but there's always sort of an imbalance present, like they're either underestimated or overestimated, and I think this still resonates in Cleopatra for sure, but I think I just always go back to that she's born with this agency versus it being placed upon her. And it kind of makes, I don't even want to say it makes her like Shakespeare's men, because I think that's a disservice to females, because she has the beautiful hybrid of also using what makes her female and using her femininity to her, and including that with her prowess. And arguably, I feel like I have to say this because I'm a woman and I do believe it, I think that kind of puts her above a lot of Shakespeare's men in a way. But what's wonderful with Cleopatra too, of her kind of being this exotic, she has the ability for these explosions of personality that I think, like, from a Roman side or a more like traditional side, that can be seen as being wrong, but because she is so steadfast in having her own identity, it's just a part of her, and so she makes it right. And again, like, I can't think of another Shakespearean woman that does that. Another thing which is a little tiny thing to add is that she essentially chooses her love as opposed to having her love chosen for her. And that's really important, I think, when it comes to the romantic tragedies of Shakespeare, because essentially her love rests upon an affair with Mark Antony, right? So she chose to sort of defy means. Whereas you have someone, for a tangible example, like Portia, her love is chosen for her, you know, both powerful women, but basically their power is placed upon them in a very different way. So just the last point before Tanisha, I'm assuming, can follow after me.
She's absolutely following.
Wonderful. It's just refreshing having the political view of women. I've kind of already talked about this. It's sort of like an added distraction and fear for the men alongside her femininity and her sensual allure. So I feel like a lot of Shakespearean men are captivated by the sensuality and the enticement of women. And I think Cleopatra has that, but then she also has all of this space and weight for the politics at the exact same level of men. And I think that a lot of the men are like scared. And not to say that I think like Shakespearean men like should be scared of women, but it's nice to kind of have the rage belong to a woman and not just a man too. Yeah. Sorry.
Fair. Tanisha.
No, I loved all of those points, and like my points were very similar. Like I love how it shows like not like the full capacity of a woman, but like this is our capacity. Like we can be leaders and like also have like all this emotional depth and just like humanity to us. I love that. Yeah, there was nothing placed upon her, and one of the things I like loved the most is that Cleopatra, like as a character, is an African queen. So like automatically I'm like, this is just, it just like makes my heart sing, because like this is what we were, like kings and queens. And so that like I just love on a different level. And then like the fact that this character is written in with like the capacity to play like all the primary emotions that there are, like all of them. Like she gets to like play with power, she gets to play with like shame and like sadness, and like in a deep level, like in like even like grief. It's very beautiful. And I love I love how you're saying the connection that Yanna and Geraint had. Like they had a beautiful connection, and she was able to like just really like, because they had a great intimacy, like she was able to just like go really far with like the grief and everything. And I thought that was great, and like that's what makes this character awesome, as opposed to like some of the more like just like, I don't want to say static, but they kind of are like characters, like because they don't really have so far to go. But this shows like just how, I'm gonna say a little swear, how badass women are. And like it's just such a great character to play with, the savage imagination that there is. And like it shows that like we are, like women are equal to men. Like it's not like there's so much more that we have to juggle because we're not seen as equal. You know what I mean? So like she really shows that, because there's so much of speaking about her, and then like her just having to like live her life. So that's why I think she's just a phenomenal character to play.
Wonderful. I'm going to piggyback off of, because you touched on something that I have in my notes, which is Shakespeare wrote a human character here with Cleopatra. Like a lot of times, the females in Shakespeare's plays, I find them kind of fall into two different categories. Like they're more the calm intellectual character, who are kind of like the Rosalinds, the Violas, the Portias, who are very kind of intellectually driven. They're formulating plots. They're moving. Or then there's more of these emotionally based characters that are more like a Juliet, or I would even say like a Lady M toward more the end of her trajectory in Macker's. But you get both sides of this with Cleopatra. Like there are times where she is playing the cool intellectual politician, and she's moving the pieces around the board, and she's playing the Romans like fiddles. And then there's other times where she becomes really emotional, where she's like, I can't believe Mark Antony got married. Tell him I'm dead. like all these things where you get to see that much more heightened emotion of this character, which is a very human thing. We're not just one thing. We're not just all emotion, and we're not just all intellect. We're a mix of both, and that's what makes us who we are. And I think that's what makes Cleopatra such a wonderful character. And Shakespeare also really captured the real life Cleopatra's intellect. Like, she was someone who killed off her sister, her older brother, and her younger brother. She was a smart cookie, that lady was. The fact that Shakespeare picked up on that and gave her such an intellectual plotting brain where even when she realizes the game is up for her, she realizes, I'm not going to be like some person in a cage getting dragged around through Rome, kind of like what happens with Tamara in the opening of Titus Andronicus. Instead, she's like, no, I'm going out on my terms, and I'm going to call the shots here. And she gets one of the most wonderfully iconic death scenes in all of the Shakespeare canon. Like, there are certain deaths that kind of rank up there, and like Cleopatra's death via snake bite is wonderful. And it's one of those things, like, going into this play, I'd read it once and I knew right away going out, it's like, oh, Cleopatra, death by snake. Even though now historically we know an asp venom actually won't kill you, but that's more of a poetic kind of way to go.
And again, sorry, just to touch on that, Mac, like, again, she chooses her death. Like, it's another choice that she's doing, right?
Yes.
And just in this production, I got goosebumps when you said, like, how the end moment there, when she sort of gathers the women together and they're holding hands over Anthony's body. And again, it's that, like, moment of community. It's that leadership quality too, right? Of like, let's gather the masses. We are falling, but we're not defeated, you know? Yes. And she has that in that character.
Yeah, Cleopatra's such a fascinating figure. Alex, what are your thoughts?
Well, what more can be said at this point? But I do agree that no, we have a character that is in conflict with reason and emotion, and with that you get a sense of a more three-dimensional character, a lot of varieties and vulnerabilities, and we get little great moments like this. Like, this is one of my favorite moments when Alex comes back and she asks him about Antony, and this is what she says is, he was not sad, for he would shine on those. The next their looks by his, he was not merry, which seemed to tell them his remembrance lay in Egypt with his joy, but between both, which is essentially saying she's happy to hear that he is safe, but she is unhappy that he is happy without her. And she has these great moments like that. Like, even when she finds out Antony is marrying Octavia, and the messenger is describing Octavia and just treading the thin line of not upsetting the Queen of Egypt. Her beauty cannot compare. But, you know, it's good comedy, but it's comedy that can be brought back to on a human level, because it's so relatable, because it's something that, you know, comparing oneself to another in terms of attraction, that's something that we all do, and we probably also had those moments of just like, oh, he's happy without me, or she's happy without me. Well, fuck them. Oh, sorry. I don't know what to swear. Is this PG-13?
It happens
It's
every week.
PG-13. It's PG-13. We get one F-bomb.
Great. Okay.
Nice.
Oh, come on! I wanted to use it.
Sorry, Will. Next time.
But yeah, I just wanted to touch on those little comedic moments, because that just adds so much to even the grander themes of the piece. So you got major and minor elements within her.
Yeah, absolutely. Will, any more final thoughts on this topic before we head into the next one?
I do have some thoughts to add to this.
Ooh.
The first one is this. Like, I have one word that I kept thinking about when I looked at this question: why is Cleopatra one of the great female roles in Shakespeare's canon? And my immediate thought was, okay, what other great female roles are there? And like you, Jill, I thought of Portia, I thought of Lady Macbeth, I thought of like Juliet, for instance. I thought of all these different female roles that a lot of actresses that I've spoken to really aspire to one day play if they're interested in Shakespearean theater. But the one word comes to mind when it comes to Cleopatra that really makes her so much greater than all these other female roles. And like, upon rewatching, because I have seen a previous recording of Antony and Cleopatra, and I've read the play a few times, but like, until I saw this recording and I saw Yanna's performance, and I don't know if it was Yanna's performance or if it's just seeing the character on stage in its full power that I really clicked, but I think this is the greatest female role in my opinion. Like,
Hands
and
down.
it's because the one word that comes to mind for me is autonomy. She chooses. She has choice. She imposes her choices onto other people. Unlike all these other female characters and all of the other canonical pieces of Shakespeare, where choice is imposed upon them and then they make the best of their situations, right? Or they have to guise themselves in order to employ their choices onto other people, as we see with like characters like Portia, who literally cross-gender dress in order to prove that she is more intellectual than most of the men that play in her own story, right? But like the biggest thing that really captured this for me in terms of Cleopatra, and it's funny too because it's the Roman philosophy of Stoicism, but like Cleopatra herself is very much a Stoic character in the sense that there's this philosophical practice, and then don't get me wrong, it's a very dark side of Stoicism, but it is a side of Stoicism that shows great resolve and recognition of one's lot in life. But there's this idea in Stoicism that if you are at a point in your life where literally nothing could be worse, you've lost everything that you possibly can. As many of you know with Stoicism, like one of the main doctrines of it is like, you know, if you can take action in your life to change something for the better, then do it. And the things outside of your control, you must abandon all control, like all hopes to control it, because it'll bring you nothing but stress and depression, essentially, right? But the one aspect of this, and it plays so well, I'm sorry, I'm kind of collecting my thoughts as I go, because like it's a complex thing. But the first thing is that when life has stripped away everything that Cleopatra really clings to as worth living for, she makes the final choice that any one individual can make from a Stoic practice, which is to end that life, right? And then for the Romans at the time, it's an interesting thing too, because for the Romans at the time, suicide wasn't seen as some sort of taboo thing. It's like if you felt your life had run its course and that there was nothing greater that you could add to the world, then that was your time, right? The world isn't always going to lend itself to that. So it was interesting to see this female character that, one, makes that choice herself, and two, and this is the biggest thing, this is the thing that for me, I was like, that's why she's the greatest female in my mind for the canon, is like, when there are other females that die along with the protagonist, they usually die before or with the male protagonist of the story. She doesn't. She goes on living, and it's only until she feels her life has run its course does she join in the afterlife, whatever that she wants to join with, right? But she makes the choice, right? Unlike Juliet, who chooses to die with her lover. Unlike Lady Macbeth, who dies before her lover, right? And it's always in the contrast to the lover, always to the lover, right? But not with Cleopatra. We see a character that goes on living, trying to make the best of her situation. Then only once every option, every path has been exhausted in her mind, does she make the choice. And I think that autonomy, that's the pinnacle representation of that autonomy for her as a female character in Shakespeare's canon. But if we're talking about why she's the greatest female role, like that for me captures it all, man. A Stoic through and through, and lived her life beyond her love. And I think that is the most important thing to see in a lot of these female characters for Shakespeare.
It was lovely too, seeing through the scope of Yanna's work with her, and in the pre-show chat too, she talked about, Lois asked her a question, how does Cleopatra change Antony? So this question was kind of involving Antony through the trajectory of Cleopatra, and Yanna's answer was similar to what like Will's kind of talking on, is she said, well, at the end of the day, Cleopatra and Antony are just two people living up to their own legends, and they both become themselves and both become more human. And I liked that was sort of the premise of her approach to this, is like they weren't finding their love or their politics through each other. They were both on their own paths, you know, and as deep as their love was as a unity, they both thrived as individuals. And you see that very clearly when Antony passes. And even Yanna was saying, like, even after Act 3, there was so much more at stake, and it wasn't just love. And she's like that, and especially when we get to Act 5, like that sort of had to, like Will was saying, that had to kind of be pushed aside and be like, okay, what's next? And so yeah, absolutely. It's love that she said that in the pre-show, because we got a little case study into the mind of Cleopatra. So
yeah.
I just want to really quickly too, like what Will was saying, like as a person who actually hadn't read this play and was watching it, I was like, oh no, when I saw Antony die, I was like, is she gonna do another Juliet? I was real worried. And then when I saw her kept living on, I was like, yes, queen. Blew my mind. So yeah, I love that. And she consistency through and through, like beginning to end. Yeah.
Love that.
That was maybe the most appropriate yes queen I've ever heard.
Yeah. Seriously, quite literally.
Best yes queen, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so some scholars and people consider Antony and Cleopatra the sequel play to Julius Caesar. While there are carryover characters between the plays, is this a true sequel? Alex, lead us off on this one.
I would consider this more of a legacy sequel than like a perfect or true sequel, because with a legacy sequel, you have elements that carry over, but usually follow new characters. And we do have the I'm probably going to butcher this because my Latin is terrible. The tributive of Davies and Antony and that other guy.
Yeah.
Lepidus?
Lepidus? Yeah,
Lepidus, yeah. That other guy. Yeah, that carries over. And, while reading it, you do get the looming sense that Antony wouldn't be in this position without the events of Julius Caesar.
Absolutely.
And he wouldn't have gotten to the position that he was in. It's also weird to think about because I was also reading Julius Caesar and just looking at the history. It's just like there should have been some mention of Cleopatra at some point in Julius Caesar because she was mother to both Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Actually had children with both of them. So that's why I would define it more as a legacy sequel. It's because elements are carrying over, and we're also discovering new elements. Like there's other parts of the Roman Empire, like Julius Caesar. The structure of the writing is set and to the point. Everything has like a definite form, and we have talked about how Egypt has this more free flowing form about it to the country and to in the court and with the people. So we get new elements into this world. So if that answer makes any sense. So that's
absolutely. Will, what are your thoughts?
I mean, like I'm just looking at the publication dates between the two plays, and it's a 24-year difference as well. And I think that's something that needs to be considered when we're talking about is this a sequel? Is it not a sequel? I mean, from a historical perspective, of course, it has to be considered as a sequel. It's like literally a chronology of the events that took place over that time period, right? A true sequel. I have to agree with Alex in what he said. Something about that, like a legacy sequel, feels correct in my mind. It's obviously not a true sequel. There's a huge amount of time that passes between the death of Julius Caesar and this play. I mean, but beyond that too, there is clear, obvious references to the events of Julius Caesar in this play. Like literally, he talks about Brutus, he talks about Cassius, he talks about the role that he played in Julius Caesar's death, right? And like all the events that took place there. It's kind of like a final moment of confession for him too, in a lot of ways, right? Like the one thing that's really bore on his mind over the years. But really, I think, talking about it as a sequel or not a sequel for me is for these two plays not necessarily the question that I would want to focus on. And I'm sorry, I know I'm segueing a little bit, but I'd be more interested at some point in the future to talk with everybody about the idea of like, what do these two plays say together? Because the one play, Julius Caesar, is like the representation of like the beginning of the downfall of the Roman Empire. And then this play over here is the downfall of two empires, right? In a big way. And I'm curious what it is that Shakespeare, because to write a play 24 years later with similar characters that takes place just later down the line in one character, Mark Antony's life, and to really ask ourselves, like, why did he feel the need to wrap this story up in a different way? Like, what was it about the ending of Julius Caesar that he felt really didn't say what he thought he needed to say? And I mean, I don't think it's any secret that Shakespeare harbored a lot of opinions about empires and how empires develop and how empires fall. A lot of his stories are about just that, monarchs falling from grace and the degeneration of their ruling class, right? And we see so much of that. And then like the priority that he puts up on this and in Julius Caesar too, like what are the two most powerful moments in both these plays are the moments of emotional weight, right? Mark Antony grieving over his friend Julius, right? in this play, Cleopatra and Mark Antony grieving over each other. Like those are really the cornerstones of both these plays. Like they have such symmetry between their two moments. Like it's the loss of family, it's the loss of love, it's the loss of brotherhood, it's the loss of siblings, for instance, right? Like there's so much within these two plays that rely on those emotional contexts. And I'm curious what it is that maybe these two stories together are trying to say, and what Shakespeare might be trying to tell people when it comes to like the worship of one's country, when it comes to addressing the faults in our ways of ruling, right? Because like both these plays have so much to do with those questions. But and I'm sorry, like I said, I went on a bit of a segue, but
no, it's a good segue.
Yes, it's a sequel. Just chronologically, it serves itself to be a sequel. It's written 24 years after Julius Caesar, so in terms of the time that the plays were published, it is also a sequel. It has the same characters. It references events from the previous play. Yes, it is a sequel. A true sequel would pick up right after the death of Cassius and Brutus from the last play, but you know, I'm more than okay to jump ahead and cover this topic because it's such a rich story to tell. So yeah, it's a sequel in my opinion.
Yeah, Tanisha.
No, it's interesting that you say that because I was thinking like, well, maybe it would be a sequel if he just jumped ahead in time and was like, well, screw all that stuff that happened before then. Let's just cut to the juicy like love affair, right? And so I thought like maybe it's not like a true sequel because it doesn't take place right after, but yeah, maybe that was his choice. I was thinking like maybe that's like what I was thinking if he was gonna, like you were saying, like he sat down and wrote a play about with all these same characters. Like I was thinking maybe if he wanted to do it, he was like, okay, where do I begin? Well, why don't I do it this way? Which sometimes can happen. So I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, Jill.
So this bleeds lovely into what I'm about to say. I was going to say loverly, but you know, because that's a word.
We're not in My Fair Lady, Jill. This is not My Fair Lady episode. That's later on.
Yeah. Just because I have this visual in my mind of if you sort of, for some reason, I'm picturing a Google Maps where you're sort of like overlooking everything, and then you can like zoom into a particular house or a particular building or a particular location. So I almost see like if you're watching Julius Caesar and you're watching the history that comes prior and post that, you're sort of hovering, getting a landscape of the shell of the politics and stuff. But then something like Antony and Cleopatra, it's like you're zooming in a couple more notches, and you're actually sort of like Antony and Cleopatra is like a case study of humanity within the politics. And I think, so I would say, no, it's not a true sequel, like quite literally, yes, as Will was saying, but no, in a sense that this piece, I think it's bookended by love for a purpose, I think. And I think it's more lovey than it is political, even though a lot of the jargon that happens in this piece is very political. We've talked about this throughout the night, there's so much undertone of humanity, and quite literally using rich poetic language like speaks right into the love through line too. And I think what makes this piece a standout, arguably in the canon too, is that it's this lovely hybrid of like R&J meets history play a little bit, which I don't think we get a lot of. And even, you know, in something like Julius Caesar, sure, you could say it's not necessarily as rigid as other history plays, but there's a bit of like the same standard revenge plot-esque thing. Whereas with this piece, you have a bit more scope into the titular character's love right alongside the speeches that are running which way and talking about battle startings and endings. And so I think this piece is so unique in that way. Like it's a lovely hybrid of that it has to stand alone. Like I think it almost does a disservice to call it a sequel to Julius Caesar because it is so unique in its own way. And again, like we've said this a bunch, but I think a lot of this is the story is seen through the humanity and intimacy. The stakes are intimate more so in this piece than they are political. And I think you can't necessarily say the same thing with Julius Caesar. So not a true sequel, should stand alone as its own little hybrid of romance meets history. And mini seminar.
Wonderful.
I could just add one more thing to this topic.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, for me, like, because there's been a lot of talk during this conversation about like the time jump that takes place, right? And I think the time jump in itself says something about maybe what Shakespeare might have been trying to say, because like Julius Caesar ends on this incredibly dark note where like some of the biggest players in Rome and like the people that made the democracy run, right, are now dead, and there's very few people left, and the whole the political stability of Rome is shaken, right? But then we jump ahead in the next play, everything's settled again. There's new rulership. It seems like everything is back to how it was running before. And like that time jump alone that he chooses to make it in the history of the pieces, like for me, I don't know if anybody here watches BoJack Horseman. Dismissed? Okay. There's a great quote in it, but I think sorry?
I've seen it all. It's amazing.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a quote right towards the end of the show that like for me just kind of captures maybe what this time jump in Shakespeare's mind was about, which is and I'm sorry, I'm gonna ruin our PG-13 rating right now. Is that okay?
Go for it, Will. Why not? We'll throw
one
a
of the characters
disclaimer in
right
there.
towards the end of the play says, "Sometimes life is a bitch, and you just keep living." Right? Like sometimes life is a bitch, and then it just goes on.
Yes.
And I feel that really the end of Julius Caesar to the start of Antony and Cleopatra really captures that. It's like at that point in Rome, especially from Mark Antony's perspective, like everything was over. The empire was falling, right? And then yet we come into this next play and it's very much like everything's settled, everything's fine, because somehow we, like as human beings, like we find a way to just keep living. And it's like one of the greatest aspects of humanity, I think. We just find a way. But yeah, so we're talking about why there's such time.
Alex, and then I'll give my final thoughts, and I'll move us into the last question.
I just wanted to share a fun little fact. So both Julius Caesar and Antony and Cleopatra were inspired by the same source material, which is Thomas North's translation of Plutarch's Lives in ancient Greek. And
Plutarch.
Plutarch. Thank you. I'm terrible with names.
Okay.
I just wanted to just share that.
Share that nugget. Love it.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. And I'm going to end this off where I think this is a sequel the same way Henry V and Henry IV Part 1 and 2 are sequels, because it's that bigger journey of Hal to Henry. And at the beginning of Julius Caesar, we see Mark Antony kind of Julius Caesar's side guy, and then we see this journey throughout Julius Caesar of Mark Antony becoming this leader, and then we kind of lose the middle part of the story where they break Rome into three, and Mark Antony gets to be with Cleopatra. But then we're picking up at the end of this story, but it's this wonderful character arc story where if you put them together and you cast the same actor to play Mark Antony, you get this wonderful bigger story of this man's rise and fall, where Shakespeare's bigger exploration of these leaders who have these wonderful high highs, like beating Cassius and Brutus in the Caesar funeral speech, and then you also have the lowest of the lows where at the end he commits suicide because he thinks he's lost Cleopatra. It's this wonderful picture of this human leader, and I think that's what Shakespeare is trying to show, and this will tie into my next question, which is showing the wonderful grayness of these leaders that we've had throughout history. And that ties into a much bigger topic I can get into about what we're doing now with our historical figures and the fact we're ripping all these statues and things down, and I go, we as people need to remember that they were human. They aren't all good and they aren't all bad, and Mark Antony's a mix of that. Like we have to remember that Rome came in and conquered Egypt. Like they killed a lot of people, and they weren't the best people, but at the same time they gave us these beautiful sweeping stories that Shakespeare was able to translate onto the stage. Like we have to remember that these people were gray. They weren't black, they weren't white, they were just these gray human people. And I think when you put these two plays together, Julius Caesar and Antony and Cleopatra, particularly through the character of Mark Antony, you get this beautiful gray human being who is fallible, who is trying his best to balance his worlds. And I think it's a wonderful kind of lock piece together where they show the full picture of a human, not just the ending of somebody's life and the beginning of somebody's rise It's that bigger picture. So yeah, I do think this is a sequel. Final question though is, unlike the other Shakespearean tragedies and history plays, this play lacks a true villain. Why do we think that is? And if we had to name a villain of the play, who would it be? And I actually want to kick this one off because it ties in with my last one, where I don't think this play has a villain because it's representing life. Life is made up of a thousand cuts. Like it's not just one thing. In any part of our lives, we have people who we're against and people who we're with. And I think that's what this play captured, is this humanity that we live in, where people aren't all good and people aren't all bad. Sometimes Octavius Caesar, not the greatest guy. Mark Antony, not the greatest guy. But at other times, they're great people. And it's that one part of Shakespeare where a lot of times you can really identify a villain of a play or an antagonist in a movie. And here it's, no, these are all human people with their own mistakes and problems. And where else I have in my notes here about this? I mean, even if I mean, if I had to name villains, I would say kind of Mark Antony and Cleopatra are their own worst enemies. They're great together, but at the same time, they destroy each other. They're this thing of, the minute Cleopatra finds out that he's gone off and married somebody else, she becomes angry and tries to calculate getting him back, which then leads to a bigger conflict, which leads to the war, which then leads to Mark Antony losing his army, which then leads to the Cleopatra saying, well, I'm dead, so tell Mark Antony this. And Mark Antony hears this, he kills himself. Cleopatra then has now lost her ally to Rome in her security of power, and thus gives room for Octavius Caesar to come in and kind of force her out. So there's this thing of, there are these wonderful combustible characters where they play their own worst enemies with each other, because they bring out the best and worst in each other. They're which is great. I mean, if you had to name a real big villain of the story, it's Rome. I mean, the fact that if Rome hadn't gone in there and conquered Egypt in the first place and is just left well enough alone, wouldn't have any of these problems. But Rome, that's history. History is made of people conquering people. That's just history since the dawn of time. We've seen it throughout all the ages, throughout different countries, different situations, and it's this thing of, one country comes in and creates all these ripple effects. I mean, we see that with colonialism, we see that with the world wars, it's these things of Vietnam, it's these things of, one country comes in, messes with another country, which then creates all these ripple effects you couldn't predict, like Mark Antony and Cleopatra ending up together because Caesar gets killed off after he's conquered Egypt. Rome is just the bigger enemy of the story in general, for all that stuff. Jill, you're nodding along.
Yeah, if I could piggyback off of that, because I basically, in my notes, almost had verbatim of what Mac was saying, how technically, yes, this piece lacks a true villain, because we've talked about this through almost every point we've touched on tonight. The play focuses more on the true complexity of humankind, that there really isn't necessarily a right or wrong, or even an alive or dead. And so, and a lot of the times in this piece too, there's the switching of sides. And we see this is kind of similar in Coriolanus as well, with his relationship with Aufidius. Aufidius is seen as the true, villain to start, but then that switches and that sort of bleeds into each other. And so this is happening again in Antony and Cleopatra. Arguably everyone is kind of has their haunches up of who's going to betray me next, or who's my true ally, who's my true love even. But speaking directly to Mac, you hitting it on the nose, that yes, to me, Rome is sort of this ominous, omnipresent villain. To me, it's choosing to sort of humanize that. Octavius, for me, is what I would necessarily peg as the villain, just because he's also just a pot stirrer. I'm so team Antony and Cleopatra, and he just gets on in there and is like, politics, politics, politics. You will marry my sister because this is the next right thing to do. And so in a way, if we're talking about this piece as being a scope of humankind and really getting into the intimacy as opposed to the structuredness of human, Octavius is always the one pushing against that, you know? And so he's not human in my sense. He's very much rigid and to the books, which arguably you could say like, well, that's human too. But I think because the play is Antony and Cleopatra and it is about their entwinement with each other, Octavius he's like that person that comes in that you're like, go away, like you're like a little fly I want to flick. And to me, he reminded me a lot of like an Iago. He was like the Iago to this, I don't know, he just was like sniveling on the stage, and I kept wanting to be like, leave, just let them figure stuff out. So I guess in a way, if I had to choose, Octavius would be sort of the embodiment of this Roman play by the rules thing that this piece is like attacks with. Yeah.
Will, I see you smirking down there on the screen.
Well,
what are you going with here?
Because like I agree with so much of what you guys are saying. I just have like one slight difference of opinion. My original note for this, like immediately after reading the question, I wrote Caesar in all caps with exclamation marks. But upon further investigation and reflection, like throughout our entire conversation, I actually think Shakespeare is saying something a little bit more nuanced about humanity as a whole. And it goes back to Stoicism, as I was saying. Like I think there's a reason that he was a little bit fascinated with Roman culture in terms of some of the practices that they had. Rome, obviously, being one of the more bigger places where Stoicism was made popular. And it's not uncommon for Shakespeare to stage like an emotion or an idea as the villain of the piece. Like in Macbeth, we see greed and power, right? Corrupting, right? And like we can obviously and very easily stage Macbeth as the villain of the piece, and Lady Macbeth as like the villainess, or however you want to phrase that, right? But like it's such an easy thing to stage these quote unquote evil characters as evil. But I think the more complex thing to do would be to ask ourselves what makes them evil. And I think in this play, where the evil resides, like where the antagonistic quality of the play is, lies in untempered passion and emotion. And we actually see this in Romeo and Juliet too. There's not really a real villain in that story. You could argue the parents are, you could argue Count Paris is, or whatever, which way you will, but really the true villainy of the piece is their unwillingness to wait and see what happens. And why, again, I feel Cleopatra is such an amazing female character, because she waits. Even after Mark Antony is dead, she continues waiting to see what's going to happen. She kind of represents, I think, what Shakespeare is telling us all to do, is like even in the darkest moments, like where all seems lost, like wait, just wait. Like, don't let your emotions control every action of your life. Emotions are good, but they must be tempered by thought. And this is actually something like, it's not a new concept. It's been around for thousands of years, and it's a common practice in even like psychology and therapy nowadays too. It's like, you can't just let your emotions dictate the way you perceive the world around you. They're good indicators for what we can believe the world around us to be representing, but they can also be great liars of our interpretations of the world, right? Like, how many times have you spoken to two people about the same event and both of them have different perspectives on that event, right? And like, it's a similar thing. And I really do think Shakespeare is advising, maybe not aggressively, but I do think he's asking the audience to explore their feelings a little bit more thoroughly and be a bit more active with their conscious thought about their feelings. Why are these feelings taking place? Why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? Are my actions justified based on what's happened, or is this just an emotional reaction, right? Like, emotions without the temperament of consciousness are dangerous.
Fair enough. Alex, what are your thoughts?
I think everyone's pretty much hit the nail right on the head there. Because what I had written down was, you know, right off the beginning, we get opposition, not just lines within the text, but one of the things that comes up a lot is reason versus emotion, and the emotion getting in the way of the intellectual thought, like that was previously stated. So I feel like the protagonists are also their own antagonists as well. And I've read certain articles which it's clear that Octavius Caesar is the antagonist, but if Antony didn't do what he did, would Octavius respond in that way? Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. Who knows? It would be a completely different story. But I do think the emotions are essentially the antagonist versus reason, which is kind of the protagonist, if that makes any sense. That's how I view it. Yeah.
Nice.
Wonderful. Tanisha, lead us into the finale here. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts, it was interesting because going into it, again, like I hadn't read it, whatever, and I was thinking, I was like, oh, is Cleopatra going to be the villain? And then watching, like, ooh, maybe this Octavius guy is the villain. For sure he's the villain. And then just watching, like, it in its entirety, I was like, ooh, good point, Shakespeare. People are not like villains or heroes. Like we like I forget what it was. I actually think it was from BoJack Horseman where he said there's no good or bad people. You just make good or bad choices.
Yes.
Like, it's all about choices that you make in your life. And sometimes you make a lot of bad choices and your whole life is bad choices. Maybe, like, does that make you a bad person? No, just make better choices going forward. And that's like what BoJack like comes to grips with, whatever, in a nutshell. And what I thought was just very interesting was it's like no one person is the villain. It's just the choices that people make, like with each other, or like choices that they make based on reactions to other people, or just like what they decide to do, like everyone's saying, like with their emotions, like in the heat of the moment. And one of the like my favorite parts was when Cleopatra like gets so mad at the messenger for telling her that what
Mark Antony?
Yeah. I don't know why the name just ran out of my brain. Yeah.
It's the other guy, yeah.
So mad at the messenger, like to the point where he was like, I did nothing to you, okay? And she was like, true, come back, I'm sorry. And then she was like, but it was just that moment where she was like, she had to catch herself and be like, yes, okay, I was in the heat of my emotions, and like kind of like allow reason to come in there. But like still, yeah, like when anything like truly like devastating happened, it was because it was people's choices based on like their emotions. So yeah.
It's funny, Mac, to even have us ask this question, like how often humans just look for like a scapegoat of their own personal tragedies. Like, you know, the fact we're asking the question, is there a villain? Oh, because heaven forbid if there's not one person to carry the brunt of all the tragedy, look out. And like that's so indicative of the characters within the piece. Like you turn a blind eye, you literally turn around and you have a knife in your back, you know, and it's like they're so it's just, yeah, that's really, this piece says a lot about the whole what is a villain and what makes a villain, and why humanity always has to find, you know, the answer in a villain.
And maybe therein lies the response as to why this is a sequel piece too. Like, because the previous one very clearly states, like, these are the villains of the piece.
That's true.
Maybe Shakespeare had some second thoughts about what villainy actually looks like.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, history is filled with people being turned into villains because of what somebody else says. I mean, I hate to say it, but the man south of our border right now, like that's what he started his whole campaign with, was he figured out how to incite people against another particular group. You've seen that with Stalin, Hitler. We see that in other non-political arenas too, like just between sports teams. They'll make the lead player of their team again, I can do a villain. Every time the Boston Bruins play the Maple Leafs in the playoffs, whatever his name is, the big giant the Boston Bruins have, him, thank you. He's always the bad guy. He's always the big goonish villain that we all want to body check out of the game.
He's my hero.
There you go. But once again, like, he's a hero to Boston, he's a villain to Toronto. Like,
Alex is the villain of this panel. No kidding.
That was my goal. All right, good night, guys.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, actually, we are at the end of our episode. We've actually chugged right along on this. I'm really happy about this. Alex, why don't you kick us off? Where can people find and follow you if they want to get in contact with you and follow your adventures across the pond?
Oh,
when you get back there.
When I get back there, yeah, soon. They can follow me at alexanderosborne.official at Instagram. I know it's a long name. I apologize.
That's
I'm
fine.
trying to create something else.
That is totally fine. Jill, where can people find you?
Yeah, so usual spiel. My artist Instagram account is at Jillian with a J .Robinson96, and you'll see many posts from Cup of Hemlock. We released our ghost recording, and I am also part of the Laramie project, directed by Autumn Smith. That'll be coming out July 24th. You'll see a lot of promo stuff regarding that. And proceeds are going to Muskoka Pride to support that community. So, yeah, and I like to sing and be my silly, bubbly self. So go to my artist Instagram account at Jillian.Robinson96.
Wonderful. Tanisha, where can people find you?
My name is just Tanisha Sinclair at all platforms. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, so you can find me there. I just have one personal account. I don't have an artist account yet, so Tanisha Sinclair, you'll find me there.
We'll find you there.
That rhymes.
That's a
quite
perfect
catchy.
thing. Will, where can people find you?
I'm proud to say I actually loaded up my Instagram in the background while we were talking so that I can remember what my Instagram handle is. I will restate it again as I restate every panel. I am not a social media person. But my Instagram is Will R. Bartley. That's it.
Yep.
I'll be honest with you though, folks, if you're checking out my Instagram, it is entirely promotional material for Cup of Hemlock and literally nothing else. But if you are interested in getting in touch with me, my Facebook is Will Bartley. My Gmail is will.bartley12@gmail.com. I'm always open for conversations and discussions. If you have any questions about anything or you're interested in working with Cup of Hemlock and in the capacity, feel free to shoot me a message on any of those 3 platforms. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. But email is the fastest way. So, yay.
Wonderful. And Will, why don't you announce what our next polished reading will be, since we just released Ghosts? What is it going to be?
Oh, sure. Okay, sure. Yeah, we're actually going to be doing George Bernard Shaw's Man of Destiny. It's a bit of a smaller cast, a bit of a shorter play, but we're really excited to get started on it. We'll be solidifying the cast by the end of the week. So, yeah, it'll be great. And then post that, we're really going to be branching out to find some different plays. Yeah. That's the next one we're working on. Is there anything else I should say about that?
Nope, that's perfect. We'll have more details coming down the line on that front. Once again, you can find me at all social media platforms at Mackenzie Horner. Just look for the Ginger Guy. I post a lot about different things in there, whether it's Cup of Hemlock stuff or my podcast stuff. We just announced today that next week we'll be releasing Hairspray as our next musical we are covering. So be sure to tune in for all that fun stuff. And I can say that for our next panel, we're going to be talking about really one of the most iconic plays of the Shakespeare canon, the love story to end all love stories, R&J. And on that panel, we have a very special guest, Autumn Smith, coming on. And she is my co-host for the podcast that her and I do.
And my current director for the Laramie project. So. Exactly.
So Autumn is very much... Yes, she's wonderful. So she's coming on for the next one to talk to us all about R&J. We've also just started our countdown for our one-act play submissions for our one-act showcase. So head on over to our social media pages to get all the details about that. And every week we'll be doing the continual countdown there. But yeah, other than that, stay healthy, stay safe, everybody. We'll see you next week when we talk all about R&J. But until then, we'll see you in a week. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.